Alright, so here we're going to look at a nice feature of within Python, and this is the use of list comprehension. So let's say that you wanted to do something for every element in an iterable object, in this case a list. So you maybe would want to add a value to every value in a list, or concatenate a string to every value in a list, or run some type of test like an if statement and return only elements in the string that meet the criteria. So that could be accomplished with a for loop. So for example, I'm just going to add in here another code block, and we're going to set this up with a for loop. So here, what I'm doing is I want to only return countries that start with B. So let's do that with a for loop. So again, with a for loop, first we need the list object, so let's copy that up here. And then we're going to do for, I'm just going to say C, since they're countries, in list 1. And then we'll lay out what to do. So if C at index 0, so the first letter, is equal to B, then we'll do something, and then else we actually don't need to do anything else because we just don't want to return it. So I'm going to create an empty list. We'll call it B list, and I'm just going to make that an empty list. And so if that's true, then we'll just concatenate or append this into that list. So we'll do B list dot append C. So I believe that'll do what I want it to do, right? So we created a list here of countries. Then I created a blank list to save the results to. And then now I'm saying for every country in the list, if it begins with the letter B, append it to the B list. And since there's no else or anything, all the other countries will just be ignored. And then just to see if it worked, we'll just do a print here. Print B list. Okay, and that spits back Belgium, Bulgaria, and Belarus, which are the only countries that begin with B in the list. So it looks like it worked correctly. So anyway, this is how you could accomplish this with a for loop, but list comprehension allows you to do something similar, but in a more readable and more concise way. All right, so this is the first example here. So for C in the list, it'll get returned if it meets this criteria, right? So for the countries in the list, if it meets the criteria where its first letter begins with B, you'll return that country to the list, right? So again, this is basically doing the same thing, but in a much more concise way. So if I print this, we'll see we get the same result, right? So we basically have like a loop, right? So we have for C in list, and then we have a condition, and then we return C. So this is pretty much exactly what this did, again, just in a more concise way. So in this one, we get a subset of the list, but it is also possible to just do something to every element in the list, and in that case, you're not going to need an if statement or a condition. So in this example, I just want to append to this, I would like to visit, and I'm going to append that to each of the countries for every country in the list, and I'm going to return that into a new list, list 2. And you can see what it did there, just appended that onto each of them. So again, we got all of the elements back because there was no if statement and condition to subset out. So we just performed the same operation on all the elements in the list. Again, with using a fairly concise code here again with this list comprehension. So let's just make up one other example, which is kind of practical. So let's say you have a list of files. So we're going to say, we'll set file 1.txt. Oh, I guess I need to put these in quotes. File 1.txt, file 2.txt. Man, I keep messing up my quotes here. File 2.txt, file 3.txt. Alright, so there's a list of 3 files. And let's say that we need to actually get a list that has the file plus its entire file path, right? So we could do something really similar to what we did above here. So I'm just going to grab this. So let's call this list 1 and then list 2. So I'm going to do, we'll say the file path is, let's do its D, data, and then we'll also, actually just to make it a little more complicated, say I want to add in the slash. So we'll do slash and plus the element. Oh shoot, I missed the plus sign there. So let's see what that does, and then we'll just print back list 2. And there we go. So that just concatenated the path to each of the files and saved that into a new list. You can also overwrite the list that you're manipulating. So we could have just done list 1 here instead of list 2, and it would just manipulate it in place. Okay, so anyway, that's some examples of using list comprehension. There's more that you could do with this, obviously, but this is just an introduction, and you'll see this used a lot if you continue to work in Python.